Hi everyone, welcome back to Actual English. I'm Jennifer Clyde. It's time for lesson 192 and today's topic is hardware, software. So you may know the difference between the two. You probably do know the difference between the two, hardware and software. Now, software is a general term used to describe a collection of programs, even procedures or documentation that performs a task on the computer system. Okay, and the hardware, it's much more of a physical thing. So hardware, let's say some examples are a monitor, a printer. These are all examples of hardware. Without hardware, you wouldn't be able to perform any tasks on a computer. And of course, software would have nothing to run on. So keep those two tips in mind and learn how to differentiate the two as we take a more detailed look into today's actual talk about hardware and software. Are you ready? All right, let's go then.
Well, it seems to me that Korea has become this mecca for technology and specifically computer hardware. I mean, I remember walking down the streets not so long ago in a certain area in Seoul, and it was just covered with loads of different shops selling all types of different bits and pieces of hardware, which, well, I've never really seen in any other country before.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I was looking for a computer the other day, and honestly, I don't know much about technology, so there's all this information about the hardware, there's different software I can use, and I just stared at the guys and with a blank look, having no idea what they're talking about.
Well, the thing is, the hardware is sort of the physical, hard to the touch things. You see, you can sort of physically touch it.
Right.
Whereas the software more is the useful programs you use.
Oh, okay, that makes sense now. I think a little bit.
I mean, you must use some programs.
I mean, definitely stuff to browse internet, and because I'm in school, so things to write my paper, to have presentations, spreadsheets. So I think those are all very useful, but they're very expensive, I realized.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the prices can start from zero to, you can write on a piece of paper.
Right.
I mean, there's no limit.
Yeah.
I mean, hardware, I don't know. It seems to have sort of plateaued somewhat in sort of the things that they're offering. I think the microchips are still really improving, but the actual physical, the box, the monitor and things like that hasn't really changed that much.
Yeah, so actually, I spilled tea on my laptop the other day, and I think there's something wrong with my computer. I'm assuming the hardware then. So do you know where I can go to get it fixed?
I do, actually, because I was just saying I went to that place the other day. It'd be the perfect place to take you.
Okay.
So can we go tomorrow?
Yes, let's go.
So hardware is what? The physical thing, what we can actually touch. It's a device that physically connects something to the computer. So without hardware, your computer would not exist. And once again, in that case, software would have nothing to run on, meaning operate on. So let's take a look at what Eugene and Michelle have to say about today's topic. It seems to me that Korea has become this mecca for technology, and specifically computer hardware. Let's take a look at the first sentence here. Now, this is what Eugene says in the beginning. It seems like, it seems as though, right? Korea has become a mecca. Mecca, M-E-C-C-A. You've heard of words such as center or even hub, H-U-B, or heart, right? Which means the very center of something. So he's saying that Korea has become the center for technology, and especially or specifically computer hardware. Now, mecca, you must pay attention because in some cases, mecca may be spelled with a capital M. Capital M-E-C-C-A. In that case, you're talking about a city. I believe it's in Saudi Arabia, a city that's located in South Saudi Arabia, I believe. But here, as you see, it's a small or lowercase m. So we're talking about something being the center, the heart, or hub of something. Okay? And then he says, I remember walking down the streets not so long ago. So, previously, I guess, in a certain area in Seoul, and it was just covered with loads of different shops. All right, let's take a look. So he was walking down the streets in a certain area in Seoul, okay? Maybe a few days ago or just a week ago, pretty recently. But what happened? The streets were covered with loads of something, loads of different shops. If you say that something is covered with something, you're saying that there is a lot of something or there are lots of something. That street is covered with coffee shops. It means there are a lot of coffee shops on that street. Okay? So he's saying the area was covered with loads of different shops. Loads of something pretty much means a large number of something, a lot of something. Okay? Now what? There were different shops selling all types of different bits and pieces of hardware. So we're talking about hardware, but he says bits and pieces of something. If you say bits and pieces, you're talking about small things, many small things, okay? Many of something. But bits and pieces, a bit is another word for a little bit, okay? And pieces would be, I guess, pieces can be large or small, but usually when you say a piece of something, you're talking about a small portion of something. Okay, so when you say bits and pieces of something, we're talking about small little things of something, of hardware, and then he says, which I've never seen in any other country before. So he's never seen anything like that in any other country that he's been to. So this is very special to Korea, okay, or very unique to Korea. Now, Michelle says, yeah, I was looking for a computer the other day, and honestly, she says, I don't know much about technology. Same goes for me. I don't know that much about technology. Although I use a computer, I use it to do the basic things, to work on, the scripts for this program, for example. I do some searching on the net. I shop online once in a while. I'm not a frequent shopper online, but I basically use my computer to write documents, to print things out, and do some basic searches. And I think it's the same for Michelle as well. She says, I don't know much about technology. So she says, what happened? When she went to look for a computer, she says, I just stared at the guys with a blank look, having no idea what they were talking about. So she's saying that she stared at the guys. If you stare at someone, you're gazing at someone or something, okay? It can also mean to give somebody a dirty look, okay, to do this. But also, now stare means to look at something, okay? So she was looking at the guys with what? A blank look. A blank look? What could that possibly mean? A blank look. If you say that you look at someone with a blank look, you're looking at someone with a very neutral face or a neutral facial expression, okay? So we'll practice this pattern later on, but what she's basically saying, she had no idea what the guys were trying to explain to her about computers because she does not know much about technology, and she stared at the guys with a blank look, with a very curious look or I have no idea look. Okay, let's move on. Well, Eugene says, the thing is, the hardware is sort of the physical. Here we go. It's the physical device. You can sort of physically touch it. That's right. Whereas the software is more of the useful programs you use. So we're talking about useful programs that you use, which happen to be software. And of course, hardware, we're talking about the physical thing, something we can actually touch. So software, usually software programs, they run on, your computer. So here we go. That's what he says. And then Michelle says, oh, okay, that makes sense now a little bit. So she doesn't fully understand what he's trying to explain to her, but she gets some kind of idea. Okay, that makes sense now a little bit. So Eugene tries to ask her a question. He says, okay, so I mean, do you or you must use some programs, don't you? You must use some programs if you have a computer and if you use a computer. And she says, definitely. Stuff to, things to, programs to browse the internet. Now, browse is a word we'll be taking a look at later on. You can browse at something or browse through something. Usually, if you browse through something, you're not really looking at something for a long time, paying attention to the very minute details. You're just looking through something, okay? You could browse around a clothing shop, for example. You walk into a clothing shop, and you're not really looking at each clothing or every clothing in detail, but you're flipping through them. You're browsing around, looking around. So she says, of course, definitely, stuff, programs, things to browse the internet, look through the internet. And because I'm in school, meaning she is currently a student, things to write my paper. We talked about paper the other day, as we call them reports in Korea. Also, to have presentations and spreadsheets. These are things she needs to use the computer for. And she says, I think they are very useful, but very expensive. Some programs can cost you a lot of money. That's true. So what people try to do is they share programs. They share disks, ask each other for the serial number and everything they need, and they share it, which is illegal. But one of the reasons people do that is because some programs tend to be quite expensive. Anyhow, she's now talking about what she usually does with her computer. She browses the internet. She does some searches. She looks through the internet and also uses her computer to what? Since she is a student, to write papers or prepare presentations or even put together spreadsheets. Moving on. Eugene says, yeah, that's the thing. The prices can start from 0 to, and then he says, I mean, there's no limit. No limit meaning the price of certain programs can be very expensive. It can start from 0 to a huge number. So he says there's no limit, okay? The number or the price can go on and on and on or up and up and up. Hardware, it seems to have sort of plateaued somewhat in the things that they're offering. Plateau here. We're talking about something that remains at the same level. There's no advance. There's no development, for example. If something remains at the same level and does not progress, for example, you can say that it's plateauing or it plateaued. So he's talking about hardware. Hardware, it sort of, it seems to have sort of plateaued somewhat in the things that they're offering. So he's saying there really hasn't been much advance, improvements. They pretty much do what they used to do a long time ago. Okay, and then moving on, he says, I think the microchips are still really improving. Hardware, maybe not so much, but the microchips are still improving. But the actual physical box, such as the monitor and things like that, haven't really changed that much. So earlier on, we were talking about hardware. Some examples were CD-ROM, the monitor or printer. He's saying these things haven't really changed that much. Moving on. Well, Michelle says, actually, I spilled tea on my laptop the other day. Okay. This is pretty easy. Spill something on something or spill something onto something. You may spill juice, milk, any kind of liquid usually. Not objects. Well, I guess you could spill objects too, but usually when you say I spilled something on something, you're talking about liquid, okay? So she spilled tea on her laptop the other day, and she says, and I think there's something wrong with my computer. Do you know where I can go to get it fixed? And Eugene says, I do actually. As I was just saying, I went to that place the other day. Perhaps he's talking about that place where he walked down the street and saw just rows and rows of shops selling things related to hardware. He says, it'll be the perfect place to take you. So let's, and then he says, yeah, Can we go tomorrow? All right, and Michelle, she agrees. She says, yes, sure, why not? Let's go. So it sounds like they have plans to check out some hardware or even software programs. Definitely, these two have plans to go to whichever area this is to get her computer fixed or laptop fixed. All right, everyone, let's take a listen to the actual talk conversation one more time.
Well, it seems to me that Korea has become this mecca for technology and specifically computer hardware. I mean, I remember walking down the streets not so long ago in a certain area in Seoul, and it was just covered with loads of different shops selling all types of different bits and pieces of hardware, which, well, I've never really seen in any other country before.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I was looking for a computer the other day, and honestly, I don't know much about technology, so there's all this like information about the hardware, there's different software I can use, and I just stared at the guys and with a blank look, having no idea what they're talking about.
Well, the thing is, the hardware is sort of the physical, so hard to the touch things. You see, you can sort of physically touch it.
Right.
Whereas the software more is the useful programs you use.
Oh, okay, that makes sense now. I think a little bit.
I mean, you must use some programs.
I mean, definitely stuff to browse internet, and because I'm in school, so things to write my paper, to have presentations, spreadsheets. So I think those are all very useful, but they're very expensive, I realized.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the prices can start from zero to, you can write on a piece of paper.
Right.
I mean, there's no limit.
Yeah.
I mean, hardware, I don't know. It seems to have sort of plateaued somewhat in sort of the things that they're offering. I think the microchips are still really improving, but the actual physical, the box, the monitor and things like that hasn't really changed that much.
Yeah, so actually, I spilled tea on my laptop the other day, and I think there's something wrong with my computer. I'm assuming the hardware then. So do you know where I can go to get it fixed?
I do, actually, because I was just saying I went to that place the other day. It'd be the perfect place to take you.
Okay.
So can we go tomorrow?
Yes, let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time for our next segment, Actual Expressions. Here we go with some vocab words. First of all, we have mecca. Once again, lowercase, it's small M-E-C-C-A. So obviously we are not talking about a city, but rather heart or hub, the center of something. What about stare? You can stare at something or stare at someone, which means to glare at someone, frown at someone, especially if you are giving someone a dirty look. Okay, especially if you're unhappy, you may just give someone a dirty look and stare at them. What about browse? Browse means to look through. So some synonyms are scan, flip through, leaf through, or even skim. Okay, you're not purposely or intentionally looking for details by looking at something very carefully. You're rather looking at something very casually for a very short time. Okay? Look through or browse at something. What about plateau? In the verb form, it's plateau. Stress goes on the second syllable, or especially in British English, the stress goes on the first syllable, so do not get confused the next time you hear a different pronunciation. Okay, we have loads of something. Okay, loads of, which means a lot of something. Okay, let's check out a sample sentence then. I received loads of support from my parents. Let's say, for example, you were going through a very difficult time or a difficult phase in life, or maybe you were having trouble making a very important decision, and your parents were always there, supporting you. In that case, you can say, I received loads of support from my parents. Instead of saying, my parents gave me a lot of support. They mean the same thing, these two sentences, but my parents gave me a lot of support sounds a lot easier and simple. So try using loads of something, loads of support. They gave me loads of support. I received loads of support from my parents. Okay, moving on to our next pattern. Give someone a blank look. Or give someone a blank stare. Okay? There is a difference between look and stare. We did check out the word stare. You're looking at something or someone with that, I don't know, a dirty look, or you're just glaring at someone, glazing at someone. Okay? So if you give someone a blank look or a blank stare, you're giving them a very blank or neutral look. No expressions. Not happy, not sad, no facial expressions, a very neutral look. So here's a sample sentence using blank look. When I told him I was attracted to him. When I told him I liked him. When I told him I was interested in him, he just gave me a blank look and kept eating. So what? It basically means that the guy, you confessed, you told him you were interested in him. I like you. And then what did he do? He just kept eating and had no facial expression. He had that blank look, okay? That neutral look on his face. Let's try this one more time together. When I told him I was attracted to him, he just gave me a blank look and kept eating. He didn't mind. He wasn't interested in what I was saying. And one final pattern it is, spill something on or onto someone or something, okay? You're scattering something or dropping something on something or someone. I spilled a bowl of milk on my homework. So here you're spilling something on your homework. But what is it that you spilled? We're talking about a bowl of milk. It can be a cup of milk, a cup of coffee. It can be orange juice. But in this case, I was thinking about maybe getting ready to have cereal in the morning with your homework on the side, and then you spill that bowl of milk on your homework. Okay, this can happen. So try practicing one more time with me. I spilled a bowl of milk on my homework. Okay. All right, that brings us to an end to today's actual expressions. Practice the vocab words and these patterns more on your own. Great job.
My hardware is not good for my software. No, I'm just kidding. Hardware and software in computers, of course, hardware would be the physical computer itself and all the circuits and everything that are inside the computer, maybe the hard drive, things like that. The software would be the programs that run on the computer. So your OS would be your software. Hardware would be the computer itself, maybe the monitor, I guess they don't have disk drives anymore, CD drive, DVD drive, things like that. So really there's a big distinction. The software would be the brain of the computer. Well, actually that's not right. The software would be, well, I guess kind of the brain, but also the hardware would be the body, except for parts of the body are also the brain, so it's not a very good analogy. However, I think that basically if you have good hardware and good software, then you have a good computer.
I guess it could be tricky to try to describe hardware and software, although we use it every single day or almost every day. So, as we emphasized and stressed, hardware is something that we can physically touch, and the software would be programs that actually run on a computer. Now, let's take a look at what Eugene has mentioned in today's actual story then. He says, of course, hardware would be the physical computer. He has given us some examples. He said it's basically the physical computer, and he said the circuits and all those things inside the computer. We were talking about CD-ROMs and monitors and printers, how they are all devices as well, and they are considered hardware. Okay, moving on to the next part. He says the software would be the programs that run on the computer. So we're talking about software, how software, they're usually programs. But what does run on the computer mean? Run, in this case, doesn't mean to actually physically run. We're talking about to operate, okay? Let's say, for example, you can say, using run, the subway runs until 11 p.m. It means the subway operates until 11 p.m. So here we're talking about software, how the software would be the programs that operate, that run on the computer. Okay, and then let's check out one last sentence. The software would be, well, I guess, he says, kind of the brain. But also the hardware would be the body. I think that was a good description. Pretty easy and simple. The software is a smart thing. So it could be referred to as the brain. It does all the thinking and it makes it possible for you to work on things. Whereas the hardware, it's hard, it's sturdy. Okay, so it's the body that actually lets you work on things. So you have the body, the structure, and then the software that could be compared to the brain that does all the hard work. Okay, that is all for today's actual story, everyone. Let's take a listen to it one more time.
My hardware is not good for my software. No, I'm just kidding. Hardware and software in computers, of course, hardware would be the physical computer itself and all the circuits and everything that are inside the computer, maybe the hard drive, things like that. The software would be the programs that run on the computer. So your OS would be your software. Hardware would be the computer itself, maybe the monitor, I guess they don't have disk drives anymore, CD drive, DVD drive, things like that. So really there's a big distinction. The software would be the brain of the computer. Well, actually that's not right. The software would be, well, I guess kind of the brain, but also the hardware would be the body, except for parts of the body are also the brain, so it's not a very good analogy. However, I think that basically if you have good hardware and good software, then you have a good computer.
So let's compare what Eugene has mentioned about how software can be compared to the brain and hardware to the body. I did mention that without hardware, your computer would not exist, and in that case, your software would have nothing to run on, meaning nothing to operate on. Think of our body and our brain, okay? If we didn't have a body, we would not exist. And in order to have a brain, we would need a body to hold our brain, okay? So that brings us to an end of today's lesson. We talked about hardware and software. Next time, let's talk about malware. Malware. Malicious is one word that just pops up in my mind. Malware. We're talking about all these different viruses, Trojans, worms, for example. Let's talk about that next time. In the meantime, come on over to our homepage. Come to www.ebse.co.kr. Look for Actual English with Jennifer and post up some comments. Okay, everyone, thanks for joining me. I'll catch you again next time. Until then, take care and bye for now.